Last week, MP Kylie Tink raised serious concerns regarding the aggressive and hostile behaviour being displayed in Australia's Parliament. Opposition leader Peter Dutton dismissed her concerns, claiming the chamber as it operates today is much more civilised than how it operated in Keating's day. Should we have to accept bad behaviour in Australia's Parliament just because it could be worse?
Kylie.
No, Yasmin, I mean, it's a fantastic question. And actually, I find it completely bamboozling that the Leader of the Opposition would offer a reference that is in a time of Parliament where I'm sure many people in this audience weren't even born. So, you know, as somebody said to me earlier today, we actually once also had dial-up internet, but we don't choose to go back there. So, you know, I think what we are seeing at the moment, at the last election, 1 in 3 Australians voted for either a minor party or an independent. And I think that was because Australians were sending a very clear message. We want to see politics done differently. We want to do better. And I think that starts with how we behave in the House. And that was what last week was really all about.
What actually happened, Kylie? Can you tell us the story?
Yeah, so the tension has been building in the House. I think it's really important we note that. You know, the voice debate has been very divisive. There's been a lot of topics that have been raised in the House that are brought into the House with emotion. But in the course of last week, the debate was all around the Qantas Qatar, you know, should Qatar be given more flights? And the opposition moved a dissenting motion, which they are very entitled to do in the House. They disagreed with the decision that the Speaker had made. But what was really interesting from my personal perspective is once the dissenting motion was made, the tension...
You didn't vote for that?
No, I didn't vote for that.
And that was the issue that the particular MP took with you?
Yes, yes. So in the end of the day, after 2 votes, everybody was very worked up. As another MP walked back to his desk, he gave me what is commonly called a gobful and, you know, challenged my vote. And I felt intimidated. And I think in that moment, it really hit me. I was in my work environment, and feeling intimidation in your work environment is not an emotional reaction I think anybody should have. So I thought long and hard about it before I stood up the following day. I was really mindful it could inflame rather than tame. But I just felt like this was something that all of us in that House had responsibility for. I'm not excusing myself. I'm a Member of Parliament. I have to be able to advocate for the standards that I expect to see take place in that building, and that's why I did it.
I interviewed Peter Dutton, the opposition leader, on the Friday morning, and he said he had spoken to this MP and that he was, you know, quite sure that what had happened was basically robust debate.
I find that so disappointing, actually. It's the only word I could use. Number one, I've never identified the MP.
So how did Peter Dutton know who it was?
I don't know. I suppose there was some capacity to self-identify in what I described, which I actually think is the problem here. You know, like, the bottom line is the reason I don't want to call this out as an individual person is because I think this is a result of the system in which we've had politics going on for the last 20 or 30 years. And just because something's always been a certain way doesn't mean it needs to be that way going forward. And I think we are a nation now that is mature enough. We have an amazing, diverse Parliament for the first time. It's time that the behaviour in Parliament mirrored what I think Australians expect the behaviour to be in the normal day-to-day.
If you don't want to name the MP, how can the behaviour change?
Because we're all responsible for it, PK, and that's my point. Every single parliamentarian in that building is responsible for how we behave. We make a decision about how we show up.
now locked in behind this MP and there's no consequences for him, right?
As I said, that's incredibly disappointing. I would still hope that members from that party and that environment might step up and go, actually, we can do better, because that's what I'm asking for, and I think that's what Australians want to see us do better. You know, what was really interesting, actually, was the number of letters I've received from teachers across the country and messages just saying thank you, because they actually made the point that they get their classes to watch Question Time and then they turn the Question Time off and try and control their classroom, and it's near impossible.
Kevin, you're a member of the opposition front bench. Do you think it's appropriate?
Look, I don't think it's appropriate that Kylie feel that way in a workplace, as she said. So, look, Kylie, I'm sorry that you felt that when it happened. That being said, Parliament in that chamber is robust, and I think that's healthy. By coincidence, a good thing did happen last week as well. We had, because another thing, we're not just talking about the chamber, we're talking about that whole building as well. And we put the Jenkins Review into action because of obviously a well-publicised event that wasn't okay in that building as well. And the Jenkins Review came back with a whole lot of recommendations. And just last week, the legislation on the back of that review went through Parliament. And that's a good thing. So there's going to be a whole lot of checks and balances and way people can report this and get consequences.
You said sorry that she felt that way, right? Is that the first opposition MP who said that to you?
Yes, but I didn't say what I said wanting that as an outcome. I want to see the change in behaviour. And I think the introduction of the PWSS is a really good thing for this work environment, but it doesn't reach into the chamber. It doesn't apply to parliamentarians.
So I just want to get you on the word robust, because I hear the word robust and it seems to me like a word you use when you want to perhaps justify certain behaviour.
Well, I describe robust as passionate. Okay, we're actually not.
Is having a go at Kylie passionate though?
Not if she's intimidated by it, no. So, but we're not a debating club either. It's not always necessarily meant to be polite. This is a passionate place, and we debate very serious things that people feel very strongly about. So I think passion behind that and robustness behind that is healthy.
Yasmin?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Kylie, I just want to say thank you. Thank you on behalf of women who heard you speaking up and on behalf of young women who see what goes on in politics and thinks this place isn't for me because it isn't a safe place. By you standing up and saying something, people around the world hear you and around Australia hear you, so just want to say thank you. But Parliament isn't a safe workplace. You know, the events of 2 years ago only highlighted that, and the Jenkins Review that you mentioned found that 1 in 3 political staffers have experienced sexual harassment. And research by Plan International Australia shows that young women's willingness to go into politics drops by half when they see this kind of behaviour. And Peter Dutton is one example of the toxic work culture of Parliament. In fact, his entire platform has benefited from that toxic work culture, whether that be relying on racist tropes about African gangs or when he described Brittany Higgins' situation as a he said, she said situation. So I'm not particularly surprised that he responded in that way. And, you know, I think it's people like that that gatekeep and maintain that power because it benefits them. But the fact of the matter is, you know, this isn't just something that happens in Parliament, this is something that happens everywhere. And if somebody goes to you and says, I feel unsafe, I think it's appalling to turn around and say, no, I'm satisfied that there's no problem with that. That's a big word to say, unsafe. So I just want to say if any politician who speaks about the Jenkins Review or whatever is worth their salt, they'd stand with Kylie and they'd stand with other people who step up and speak out about this.
Kevin, would you like to see your party take a stand on it?
Well, look, I can't speak for everybody else and for other people in the event that would happen, but I hear that Kylie was intimidated, so I don't think that's okay in the workplace. But that, just to go back to this point though, this isn't bipartisan. I mean, there's people who feel intimidated from all sides of politics from everywhere. But I've approached women in my community to run for politics, and they have said no. And they have said no not because of anything that happens in the chamber, but the vile things that happen on social media. So no one has ever said to me, Kevin, I will never stand for federal parliament because of what goes on in that chamber, but the social media platforms and the abuse that happens on that scares people away.
Well, it's all part of the wider culture, right? So it's not just what goes on in the chamber,
That's
it's what
just a
happens in the
publishing
media
tool.
and what happens in social media. And the point is, you know, we talk about women in politics, we talk about people of colour in politics, but if the orientation of the place doesn't change, and let's not forget, you know, Parliament for a very long time has been deeply misogynistic and deeply racist. You know, one of its first laws was the White Australia policy. So this is the system that we've built. You know, it's on us to change it, to call it out, and that's another symptom of the deeper problem that we have as a society.
Murray?
Patricia, I was just going to say, I think it is good that Kevin has clearly taken a stand on this issue, and like Yasmin, I thank Kylie for doing what she did last week and calling out that kind of behaviour. But I do think it is really important that leaders show an example and set a standard, and unfortunately Peter Dutton has not done that. You're right. Unfortunately, we are living in a world where on social media, even in the mainstream media at times, we see vile levels of abuse. But I know from working with my female colleagues that most politicians experience death threats. It's not a nice thing. Women politicians experience far more death threats and threats of other appalling nature.
Let's just call it
rape threats, all sorts of things that men don't go through. And that is not okay. And That's why, you know, I'm not going to pretend that I'm a shrinking violet. I've often got things to say in the chamber. But I
Do you
don't...
think sometimes you should zip it a bit more too then?
Yeah, sure. And
asking.
Sure. I think we can all do better. But what I don't condone in any circumstances, and I don't believe I've ever done, is that kind of personalised, intimidatory abuse one-to-one like Kylie went through last week. Like, it's one thing to have a go at someone about their party's position. Like, that is democracy, calling out each other on your positions, your hypocrisy, but to personally intimidate one individual in the way that Kylie went through, I don't think is okay. And leaders have a responsibility to set the standard. And, I mean, one of the reasons people like Kylie and the other Teal members are in Parliament is because the Liberal Party demonstrated they didn't get women, didn't support women, and it would appear they've still got a lot to learn.
Well, Barry O'Farrell, you have been a leader of the Liberal Party, so...
In a parliamentary chamber that was called the Bear Pit.
Yes.
Because it was so robust. But my point is that in addition to it being unacceptable, it's pretty dopey politics because, you know, Kylie is one of the independents sitting in Parliament. He may not have got her vote on this motion, but without that sort of behaviour, he might have got a vote on a future behaviour. So that's a reason why, additional reason, why this sort of behaviour should be ruled out, because it is simply dopey when you're sitting in a parliament where numbers are close, where there are independents, seats that you may want to win back one day, and you're offending people.
Intimidating.
When Parliament sits.
Yeah, should Peter Dutton have, you know, backed in his MP, whoever it is, who you won't name, or told him it's not
I
on?
stopped being a party leader a while ago, so I'll leave that to others.
You're a man with opinions.
Well, I'm a man with opinions. It's clearly unacceptable. I'm like Murray. I will not...
What would you have done?
I would not profess perfection in my 20 years in the state parliament because at times you do get overheated. But, you know, what I understand is that if you've got independents in the chamber, as we had for 16 years, you do the reverse of intimidating them, of abusing them, of making them feel threatened. You try and draw them close because there are votes happening every day.
But, you know,
Very cynical view, I know, but it's true.
My fear as well is that party politics, you know, it isn't just one side against the other. This stuff happens within factions, within parties themselves. And, you know, this is why, you know, especially I'm thinking of the Liberal Party here, I'm thinking about Brittany Higgins and how female politicians knew and said nothing because they...
And there were allegations and that ended up, of course, that court case has been aborted, right? But just to be clear about the legal consequences there.
The reason why they didn't speak up is because it wasn't safe to do so. And what happens when, you know, your position is dependent on the party's favour is that you can't go up to your boss. Like, I'm thinking when Scott Morrison interrupted Anne Rushton during a press conference. You know, that's one example where it becomes very, very difficult to call it out. So there are levels of kind of difficulties here.